Namaste everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. So I had spoken to the guest who's there today, Papa CJ, a few months or probably a year ago, I don't remember exactly, and we had discussed some other issues at that time. And then while I was talking to CJ at that time, CJ had told me he's writing a book, and the book is about the stand-up special that CJ was touring at that time and conducting it as we were speaking at that time. And I told CJ कि यार तेरी जब बुक आएगी तो मैं वापस तेरे को बुलाऊंगा तो तू पक्का आना. And Papa CJ, like a good boy that he is, he said हाँ भाई मैं पक्का आऊँगा. And I'm so excited that he is here on the podcast. So CJ, welcome to the podcast.
It's wonderful to be here. Just for listeners, I want you to know that when Kushal started this podcast, this accent of his is not the normal accent. Welcome to the podcast. I mean, he doesn't talk like this in real life. Huh? This is just for... He thinks there's somebody abroad also listening to him. But no.
मेरी बीबी तो सुनती है ना मेरे को.
हाँ वो भी ठीक है यार.
हाँ तो यार कम से कम बीबी के लिए थोड़ा तो एक इमोशन लानी पड़ती है.
So here's a question then. In the bedroom. वहाँ भी तू accent लगाता है.
वहाँ पे बोलना नहीं होता. वहाँ पे काम करना होता है.
Do you moan in Canadian?
How does one moan in Canadian? I'm just thinking, that's good, eh?
I hope she's listening to this.
But the one good thing is my wife does not listen to my podcast. So.
Somebody sensible out there.
So, okay. So, first of all, congratulations on the book. I'm really excited and really happy. I have to say that when I started reading your book, I finished it in one sitting. It took me around 3.5-4 hours. मैंने पूरी book पढ़ी and I don't say this because तू मेरा दोस्त है and because तू हमेशा बोलता है कि तू biased है, तू मेरा दोस्त है, तू biased है. नहीं मैं biased नहीं हूँ. I actually enjoyed reading the book. So to begin with, congratulations. And tell me, वैसे तूने book लिखने को decide क्यों किया?
मैंने थोड़ी डिसाइड किया है. मैं थोड़ा अनपढ़ आदमी हूँ. I hardly read. I get all my knowledge from talking to people like you. Of course, that doesn't mean it's good knowledge, but I do get it from people like you. I was touring this show, and then one publisher came to me and said that this show should be a book. It's an autobiographical show. So then अब मैं Oxford University जाके MBA किया है मैंने. So then I figured if one publisher is interested, maybe somebody else will be interested. So then I got offers from 5 different publishers. And the second one publisher gave me an offer, I used to go to all the others and say, देख क्या offer दिया है. And then I used to get them to raise their offer. And then eventually whoever decided to pay me the most money, I said, चलो यार कर लेते हैं. Not that it's a lot, huh? I mean, the deal I got eventually is basically I signed with Amazon. And they said, listen, we'll give you free Amazon Prime membership for 2 years. I said, yeah. मैं तो comedian हूँ, मेरे लिए इतना काफी है.
Yeah, but I have to say, because see, I have seen the show live and I have read the book now. So anybody who's listening to this and if you have seen CJ live and if you think, अरे यार मैंने CJ का जो stand-up special है Naked live देखा है and why would I want to read it? Trust me, the book is, I think if you ask me, an entirely different journey if you compare it with the stand-up special. And I'm saying this with all seriousness because I don't know how to take this, but whenever CJ does something, he actually kind of tells me कि यार critically इसको analyze कर. CJ thinks I'm some kind of a monster कि मैं सिर्फ खोट देखता हूँ चीज़ों में और कुछ देखता नहीं हूँ.
See, if you follow Kushal online ना, then you know कि यार ये तो critical तो होगा ही. So when you actually ask him to be critical, then his mind is confused. He's like, shit, अब मैं क्या करूँ यार? It's reverse psychology.
हाँ तो वैसे ही ठोकता रहता हूँ लोगों की. अगर कोई बोलेगा अब ठोक तो फिर मेरे को लगता है यार ये थोड़ा ज़्यादा हो गया.
कुछ होगा इसमें. नहीं मैं नहीं ठोकूंगा.
So yeah, so I highly recommend all of you to buy the book. I'm going to leave the link to the book in the description of the podcast.
No, but tell me this. So I'm interested to know, as somebody who's read the book and seen the show, in what way was the book different for you than the show?
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, I think the show, obviously, मैंने तेरा जो show देखा था, it was at a very early stage where you had a lot more material.
Yes.
And over a period of time, the show actually got shorter because as and when you kept on making the show, going ahead and ahead, you were refining it even more. So when you go to the show, naturally, सबसे बड़ा difference है कि there's a time constraint. So in the time constraint, you can't express yourself and showcase all the aspects in a, I would say, in a more coherent manner and in a more elaborate manner. What I found in the book was that there was a journey which was far more elaborate and far more coherent in terms of your life's journey. So, because you start with your childhood, then you go step by step.
Yeah.
And in the show, honestly, what happens is you're playing with the audience, right? The show is not just about Papa CJ naked. So, I mean, if you remember, even the show when I was there, जब Hive की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं एकदम start वाला.
Yeah.
So at that time, you were playing with the audience too. So वो जो journey है ना तेरी, वो उसमें break होती है. In the book, what I loved it was this is just CJ's journey. I'm reading it. This is CJ's life going from start to the.
So in fact, two things. One, I found that, see, with stand-up comedy, you have to remove every single extra word so you can get to the punchline as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of the environment you're performing in. With a book, the richness of the medium allows you to have a lot more detail, go into much greater depth, and give them a fuller picture and a richer experience because you can put in layers of emotion and things like that. And I had a second thought about... and the second thought was, like you said, I was playing with the audience in the show. In the book, I had to resist my natural comedian's instinct कि चलो अब यहाँ भी कोई joke fit कर लेते हैं, यहाँ भी कोई joke fit कर लेते हैं. So I actually held back from doing that because I did not want that to take away from the narrative. You know, I didn't want it to take away from what I wanted my reader to feel. So for me, the emotional connection and the feeling was more important than the laugh. I mean, don't get me wrong, you've read the book, there's lots of laughs as well.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my main objective.
Yeah, on laughing, the funniest one was, I'll just share this short story. So it's about, I'm not going to give it out completely, but it's actually hilarious.
Don't tell it badly, okay?
नहीं मेरे को वो जो मैं तेरे को बोल रहा था अभी पॉडकास्ट चालू होने के लिए, the funniest story.
खराब बोलेगा तो ऑडियंस बोलेगा सीजे का स्टोरी इतना बकवास है.
अरे सीजे का स्टोरी बकवास नहीं है, but I just
now he's taking out his phone by the
way, मैं तेरा फोन निकालूंगा
because he wants to read it and not screw up the telling of the story.
Man, तू देख मेरे को टेंशन में डाल देता है ये सब चीजों में.
Words are our life. That's what.
Yeah. So for me, the best was this paragraph in the book where you said 20 years later, I was telling this story on the stage. The story is basically of his friends.
Should I just tell this story?
हाँ तो बता ये story
Should I tell the story? So I was in boarding school and in Himachal Pradesh, and we had this one English teacher called Mr. Sibbal. Now he was quite a spaced out fellow. We used to call him Zap. One day he took his wife to Chandigarh for a dental appointment. While he was away, these 4 Sardars broke into his house, ate all his food, stole one Bryan Adams CD, and went away feeling very happy. Boss, what an evening we've had. We've gotten away with it. We'll never get caught. Mr. Sibbal comes back very upset that his house has been burgled. But it turns out that Zap was not as spaced out as we thought he was. The following Monday, he sets an essay writing competition for the whole school. The title of the essay is The Mystery of the Robbery at Mr. Sibbal's House. All these 4 Sards wrote exactly the same story. Right? They just changed the names. Right? And of course they got caught and they got a complete thrashing. And afterwards I asked one of these Sards, I was telling this story at Chandigarh Golf Club 10 years later. And one of these guys was there. So after the show I asked him, I said, Sardi, why did you write the truth? He said, brother, I thought we'll get full marks.
ये सच्चे इंडियन होते हैं, बोलते देख प्राण जाए पर मार्क्स ना जाए. मार्क्स तो मिलने चाहिए ना, मार्क्स बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. आई रिमेम्बर जैसे मतलब वो एक टिपिकल इंडियन पेरेंट मेंटालिटी भी होती है ना. बुखार है, कितना बुखार है, 102 के ऊपर है तो ठीक है घर में बैठना अलाउड है, अगर 102 के नीचे है 101 है चुप कर तू क्लास जा, ऐसे थोड़ा होता है, स्कूल थोड़ा छोड़ना होता है.
And your Canadian wife accepts this?
So this was hilarious, but now I actually have, so see, people of the Cārvāka podcast are used to me asking slightly weird questions and technical questions at times. I was fascinated by 2-3 aspects of your book. So I'm going to start with the place where you actually talk about, MDMA and Bhang. It's obviously about your friends doing it and how you mention that you don't get into all these things. But I have a slightly different question.
Sure.
Now, usually you associate comedy in general, whether, you listen to comics in the West in general, if you listen to their podcast, a lot of their humor at times I've felt is that comics tend to attribute a lot of their humorous element to their creativity to psychedelics or to weed or
Yeah.
to MDMA. Now you are obviously a comic who's not into all of this, and I think you're the best in India. And this is my personal opinion that I think.
I told you guys he was biased. Yeah.
No. So now, do you agree that it helps you in any creative way? Have you experienced that, or have you met comics who attribute their success to weed or MDMA?
See, nobody will attribute their success to weed or drugs. But sure, I mean, drugs put you in I mean, I don't do drugs, so I don't know, but I do drink alcohol. And sometimes you flow in a different way when different kind of ideas come to you. So each person has their own way. See, the one thing I've learned, I've been doing this for 15 years, there is no right way. Right? Each person has their own way, and if it works for you, great. So I don't think there is a fixed answer to that. It works for some people, it doesn't work for some people. You want to try it. I mean, I think there was a comedian who used to do jokes about the fact that nobody ever wrote a good song sober, and that like the Beatles must be stoned out of their skulls when they wrote Yellow Submarine. I mean, think about the words of the song. We want to live in a yellow submarine. Fuck, are you serious? Who says that? Who talks about shit like that when they're sober, dude?
Yeah.
You know?
So that one more thing that I want to add on to that is there's another aspect when you talk about your beginning, the early journey of you actually doing open mic nights in UK. You talk about you went to a class, a stand-up comedy. I don't know. It's a course. It was like a few courses.
Yeah.
Now this is something where I actually never got it. That this is my perception as an outsider who's not a comic and who just consumes the content of different people. I always felt that you either have it in you, either you're funny or you're not funny. I mean, this is my way of looking at it. So do you think when you go to a course or a class, they can maybe help you out in terms of how do you structure a joke, but they can't make you funny really, right?
So I disagree with you on that. Some people are naturally funny. I'm not one of them, right? Cyrus Brocha is one of them, right? Cyrus Sahukar, Gaurav Kapoor are naturally funny. Some of the most naturally talented funny people I've seen. Some people have to work at it. So for me, I had to work at it. When I started, comedy for me was a science. I used to have spreadsheets with jokes ranked A, B and C, so green, yellow and red. I knew that I have to start strong, end strong, and in between, the strong jokes will carry the weak jokes. So you go strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak. I used to have every joke timed. I knew, for example, I had a 90-second routine about a beggar, which had 13 punchlines, so I had a laugh every 6 seconds. Because remember, in those days, you got only 5 minutes. Now, in 5 minutes, as a new comic, you don't have the luxury of telling a 3-minute story with one punchline. 5 minutes mein log 2 baar hasenge, you will never be called back again. You got to make sure they laugh at least 20 times in those 5 minutes. You literally go bang, 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 and people can't breathe by the end of it and you're off. And the guy who books that show is like, wow, boss, what a guy, man, we have to call him back. Then, of course, as you progress and you get longer time, then you have the luxury to chat with the audience, to fool around, to tell longer stories. So when I started, it was a science. And also, I started in the UK. I had not grown up there. I didn't have the same cultural references. I wasn't following the football. I wasn't interested in their politics. So I was telling jokes. Whereas when I came to India, I've grown up here. Here I can get on stage for 45 minutes, chat with the audience, not tell a single pre-written joke and still make it fun and entertaining for the audience. So as a result, I became a lot more looser, a lot more flexible. And now it has become more art than science for me. But it's great to be able to have that combination where you can have that playfulness of the art form and the fluidity and yet have the science of a very precise joke that will just go in and boom. Over the course of time, now I have become more naturally funny. It comes more instinctively to me now because I've done it over 2000 times, right? So I do believe that you can learn how to be funny. I don't think a comedy course can teach you that. You have to learn by just doing it again and again and again and again. What a comedy course can do is it can give you a few tools and techniques, but more importantly, what it gave me, the course itself, the content was useless to me. What it did give me was a bunch of 20 other people who also wanted to do the same thing. So we had a group with shared interests who could talk about, yaar, yahan show hai, ye mere ko bhi mushkil laga, So it gave you that community with whom you could share and grow together.
Okay, so here's my follow up to that. I still find it very interesting. So if let's say if there's a budding stand up comic, so you would say that initially, because as you said, you only get 5 minute slots or 2 3 minute slots where you just go on an open mic night and there are 500 people who have basically applied for that thing, and आपको अगर नंबर मिल गया तो मिल गया और आपने जाना है और 5 मिनट में आई गेट द नेसेसिटी कि आपको 5 मिनट में आपको वापस तभी बुलाया जाएगा जब आप आपके ऑडियंसेस को हंसा रहे हो, इफ दे लाफ. सो आई गेट द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ हैविंग मोर पंच लाइन्स, हैविंग मोर जोक्स, बैंग 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 एंड दैट. बट at an art form level, so the eventual goal has to be, right, you have to set it up, right? Because when you become an established comic, you naturally go from 5 minutes to, let's say, 10 or 15 minutes or 20 minutes to a half an hour slot, or where you're opening for someone for 15 minutes. So then how do you change that? So, can they teach you that in a course?
So no, a course can teach you nothing, right? Only an audience can teach you, and experience can teach you. So let me explain to you the evolution of a stand-up comedian.
Cool.
See, in the early days, there is a certain system and you have to fit within that system. The fact is, तुम्हें 5 मिनट मिलते हैं, 5 के बाद 7 मिलेंगे, उसके बाद 10 मिलेंगे. So, within that format, there is only a certain style you can do. You don't have the freedom to really get your own style. If you're a storyteller, you don't have it within that. If you want to progress and get better, you have to fit within that factory processed cookie cutter, bang, 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 set up, punch, set up, punch. Now, as a comedian evolves, initially when you start, you want the confidence that you can make people laugh. So you will go for the easy joke. So for example, the kind of joke I've cracked in the past is that as someone who lives in Delhi, I don't understand the language you speak in Bombay. You know, like we call it bread, you call it pav. We call it pyaz, you call it kanda. Mm-hmm. We call it a servant quarter, you call it a 2 BHK. So this, I know, is going to get a laugh. Guaranteed laugh lands all the time. Then we do observational comedy, which happens throughout our careers. So the kind of joke I would do is that, you know, I grew up in Calcutta. Now, I remember taking driving lessons in London, and this instructor asked me, he says, you know, you Indians, why don't you drive in a straight line? I said, boss, I am from Calcutta. In England, you drive on the left of the road. In Calcutta, we drive on what is left of the road. Right? So, observational comedy. Then what happens is, as comedians, we want to be seen as cool, right, as edgy. So we'll use bad language, we'll pick on positions of authority, we'll do political stuff. So the kind of joke I would do, for example, is, here's one. I went to the US under the Trump administration and I had a beard. So when I get to America, the officer looks at my passport, looks at my beard. He says, you know what, you Indians, you're a mistake. In fact, India is a mistake. I said, come on, officer. As an American, you should be grateful to us. And he says, why? I said, well, because when Christopher Columbus discovered America, he was looking for India. So to be perfectly honest, you are the fucking mistake. Technically, that makes America the bastard child of India. Now, with that joke, there's a bit of a pause. And then they get it. Like, oh yeah, Christopher Columbus did discover America. He was looking for India. It makes me feel intelligent. So I'm kind of boosting my ego. Eventually what happens is, we operate in a profession that has no rules, no boundaries, no guidelines, no social norms. So for the first time, you are forced to ask yourself, what do I feel about things? What are the things that I want to talk about? It's an incredible journey of self-discovery. It's an inward journey. I mean, I've said that in the book, that stand-up comedy is an outward expression of an inward journey.
Yeah.
Eventually, you have to do what works for you. Then you don't even care about your audience. The guys who don't like your stuff will automatically weed themselves out, and your audience will find you. So this is a journey, they say, of, you know, finding your own voice. I've forgotten what your question was, but the objective is to eventually get to a place where you are authentic. Today you will see a lot of young comics who will get on Twitter, see what is trending and say, chalo, मैं इसके बारे में comment करता हूँ. Right? But if you've ever taken a job interview, you know when somebody is bullshitting you. You know when they're lying. If you tell an audience something that you think they want to hear, but you don't believe in it, eventually they're going to see through it. So I think it's all about being authentic. You've got to be you, whatever that is, and however you get there. So it's a very individual art form in many ways.
I actually can relate to this totally, and I'll take an example of a comic that I think I admire the most. That's George Carlin. So George Carlin had that joke, where he had this line, we are America. We come from the land of the whatever, excited and the home of the brave.
Home of the free, land of the brave.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But we were slave owners too. And then there was a pause, and then he says, but we were slave owners too.
Yeah.
And the audience,
Yeah.
there were like thousands of people listening to him. There was this split second silence,
And then
they're like,
boom.
And they're like, oh yes, he's right.
Yeah.
But now,
He's got this other wonderful one which is so relevant again. He says, in America, anyone can be president. That's the problem.
and that to me, that was authentic. That was a man who was a deep thinker.
Yeah.
Like, he had so many bits, whether it was religion is bullshit, which I think, till date as a child growing up, and, I used to listen to it, that 9-minute set, it made such an imprint on so many kids. But
you have to hear his bit about the environment. Have you heard
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Oh, it is so good.
The planet is fine. It's we who are fucked.
The people are fucked.
Yeah.
The planet
He's like, you narcissistic pieces of shit.
The planet is not going anywhere. We are.
Yeah.
So good.
So and that is the man who's thinking.
Yeah.
And now to connect it, and that's why somewhere down the line, and this is why you keep saying I'm biased, and I keep saying nice things about you. It's not that. I find that authenticity in you, but when I listen to a lot of comedy in India, it is that आज ये कर रहा है, मैंने मोदी को गाली दे दी, या मैंने राहुल गांधी को गाली दे दी, और मैंने. It is not driven for the fineness of the art. It is driven by clickbait.
See, the thing also you have to realize that it's a process of evolution, right? Now, I have been doing this for 15 years. Even I will look back on the material I used to do in the past and cringe. Every comedian should, right? Because it shows that you're evolving. So it's a journey that everyone has to take, where they eventually get to a point where they find their authenticity. There are some comedians who are possibly still on that journey. So I think it's maybe a little early to judge, and you should give them the freedom to grow and improve. The other thing that happens in our country is, all over the world, audiences evolve as well. And as an audience evolves, they demand better from their performers, right? What happens in India is, the second an audience evolves, see, for example, it's fashionable to abuse on stage. You'll see a young 25, and for a 21-year-old in the audience, like, oh fuck, yeah, bhenchod bola usne yaar, it's so exciting. Now, if you're 30, 40 years old, after the first 3 times you've heard him say bhenchod, you're like, okay dude, I got it. Now where's the joke?
Yeah.
There has to be some funny behind it. So, in terms of the evolution of audiences, normally an audience evolves and they demand better from the performer. In our country, the second an audience evolves, somebody else comes and takes their place. So there isn't necessarily a pressure on the comedian to be better, right? So in many ways, the fault is of the audience.
No, that is actually a very good point, because now that you say that, I can clearly remember many times I've watched these YouTube clips of stand-up comics performing in front of an audience in India, and and
they're lapping it up.
Yeah, and all the guy on the stage is doing like bhenchod.
Yeah.
And the audience laughing. I was like, उसने सिर्फ बहनचोद बोला, तू हंस क्यों रहा है? उसने कुछ कंटेंट तो निकाला नहीं, तू हंस क्यों रहे हो? So actually it is true, and also it is like that chameleon effect kind of a thing. You're supposed to laugh in a club.
No, but the other thing is also, I'm not critical of any comics, because there is clearly an audience for that.
Yeah,
it may not
absolutely.
be you.
Yeah.
But there's somebody else.
Absolutely.
So if there is an audience for that, kudos to them. They're catering to that.
Okay, now let's get into something. And I was actually, to be honest, I was kind of surprised कि तूने इसके बारे में बात भी की book में. So you actually had a lot of nice things to say about the corporate sector, performing as a stand-up comic in the corporate sector.
Yeah.
And honestly, I was like, yaar, I was personally surprised as a consumer of the book. I was like, this is interesting. So I was just curious कि मतलब, why did you, because I thought the corporate sector would be something that would be very tough, right? Ki there are certain set of rules, because companies are always worried about, at least in America it is happening, because stand-up comedy in America is a more mature, English stand-up comedy is much more mature in America than in India. So I was just listening to Rogan's podcast recently, I forgot the comic, and the comic was like, so they keep inviting me for these corporate gigs, and me being me, I behave in a certain way, and it's going to be a 3-day gig, and they throw me out in 30 minutes. So your experience has been very positive. So what's your take on performing or doing corporate gigs? So how do you mold yourself? So what's the process like?
Corporate gigs are much tougher. There is no denying that.
Yeah.
They are also extremely lucrative.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that corporate gig mein who is there in the audience? At the end of the day, it's still the same human beings. The same human beings who would be in a comedy club. They're just in a different environment. I sometimes joke that we are the largest democracy on the planet, but we are also the largest hypocrisy on the planet. Right? We are very conscious of who is looking at us, laugh at what.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of psychological gamesmanship that is required. Let me tell you two different aspects of it. I'll come to the psychological gamesmanship later. Today, your average comedian starting out is, let's say, 25 years old. Male. In the open mic nights that he performs in small bars, the average audience is 25-year-old male. A lot of the jokes will revolve around his penis. Right? Now, in the whole year, I get maybe one show through an event manager. Right? 99% of my shows are through direct clients. Because an event manager will book the comedian on whom he can make the largest margin. So he'll get a guy cheap, stick them in this corporate show. Now this guy does not have the breadth of material or the gravitas to command the attention of an audience that has the average age of 45.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now if you get on a stage and pick on a CEO and tell him teri maa ki ye, teri maa ki wo, which happens, right? Or you gesticulate physical masturbation with your hands, what happens is halfway through the act, they will pull you off stage. Now that client is not saying, I will not book this comedian again. They say, I will never book any comedian again because this is what stand-up comedy is.
That's
right?
a good point.
And our industry suffers. And I've been in 100 situations where the event manager has called me the next week and said, yaar, galti ho gayi, yaar. I should have booked you, Now in terms of the actual environment, what happens is, every show that I do, every single corporate show, I have something called a reassurance call with the client, where the client will call and say, this is our brand, this is what we stand for, we need it to be clean, it has to be respectable. I said, don't worry boss, I've done this thousands of times before, here is my client list, etc. Maybe fine. But when you get there, on the day of the show, they will have 2 pegs and say, yaar, kuch thoda masale wala suna. Right? But if anything goes wrong,
Galti
tumhari.
Oh.
Right? So, I'll tell you the psychological gamesmanship involved. I did a show once for TCS, reasonably conservative company. They had invited 300 CIOs. So I got on, and same thing happened, thoda masale wala sunao. I got on stage and I said, listen, I'm here on behalf of TCS. They have a certain brand. Right? We all know what that stands for. If you as the audience can understand that the Papa CJ brand is completely separate from the TCS brand. See, they understand their brand, I understand human behavior. If you can understand that my brand is completely separate from them, I can give you a slightly naughtier show. Give me a chair if you want a clean show, complete silence. Give me a chair if you want a naughty show, 300 people cheer. Then I look at the client. I said, sir, what do you suggest we do? He says, you give the audience what they want. Now, what have I done in that process? I have safeguarded my client's brand. I have separated myself from them. The audience is getting what they want. I am giving them whatever it is I need to do to make them smile and laugh and be entertained. Everybody's happy. Everybody's safe. And my contracts say no recording is allowed. Right? So there's no evidence. Everybody's happy.
Awesome. Now I want to go to another aspect where obviously, see, you travel around the world now to perform, and you go to Singapore, you go to America, you go to South Africa. You travel a lot to perform, to do gigs. Now here's the thing. One thing I've noticed is a lot of comics initially, international comics would not come to India initially. Obviously, एक तो audience नहीं थी इतनी, और दूसरा, would the joke travel? Yeah, would the humor cross over, right? I think जब Russell आना शुरू हुआ, और when Russell's humor does not change in India, maybe a little bit here or there, but Russell's humor is pretty standard. We get the jokes when Russell cracks them.
Yeah.
The thing is, what was your experience when, let's say, you go to Singapore or let's say you go to America? Does our humor, because there is an Indian element in your humor, so does that travel well?
You have to remember that I started doing stand-up comedy in London. My first 700 shows were in London, in the UK. London is the most multicultural city in the world. So from when I started doing stand-up comedy, I have been used to catering to audiences from any background. I've done white shows, black shows, mixed shows, British Asian shows. So after 700 shows, I first had to learn how to perform for an Indian audience. Right? For my own people when I moved back. So now, I'm not the kind of comedian also who travels all over the world, who will go to America and perform only for Indians. I don't care who is in the room. I will make it work. So it's just something I've got used to doing. What I do though is, when I go to a new country or a different country, when I get there, my research starts from the time I get out of the airport and I sit in the taxi. I start talking to the taxi driver. I've already told my promoter to keep the newspapers for the last 10 days. I find out about the recent news, the scandals, the history, the politics. My first 10 to 15 minutes, whichever country I'm performing in, are about that country and their issues. So immediately you've got them, right? And then you can take them beyond their borders. But by and large, the kind of material I do, local and topical is funnier, right? But it doesn't travel as well, it doesn't pass the test of time. So when I get to the country, I pick up the topical stuff, I pick up the local stuff. And then I take them into generic stuff that works anywhere in the world.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, for the first time I saw Russell's latest Amazon Prime special or whatever it is. I'm surprised he did not do it on Netflix and he's on Amazon Prime for starters. But there's a particular joke about a guy called Naga in that special. I don't want to reveal it because I want people to watch Russell's special too. But that was the first time in my life I realized they were not getting Russell. What Russell was doing there, and I was like, "Ye joke travel nahi kiya." My wife was cracking up. Oh, that's so funny! That's so funny. She got it instantly because it's her culture, right? It's her cultural thing, and she got it instantly. But then I told him, I actually paused it after it was done. I was like, "Did you realize that the Indians in the audience, they actually did not get it authentically? They could not get what Russell was trying to do there." And so that's why I wanted, I was like, I'll ask CJ whenever I meet him. I did not know when we were going to do a podcast. I was like, मैं जब भी तुझे मिलूंगा मैं तुझे पूछूंगा कि ये experience and how does one work around that?
See, it depends on. So I personally don't like doing jokes that will lose a single person in the audience. But sometimes as a comic you take that call. You know that if it's Amazon Prime, it's going to be seen in 200 countries, one of which is India, right? So for the odd one or two jokes, if 90% of people get it and 10% don't, that's fine.
Cool. Okay. Now this is another. It's about the craft itself. Now stand-up comedy, if you ask me per se, again from an outsider's perspective, it is your performance for the people out there. And I remember in our last podcast,
by the way, all this stuff you'll find out in the next book. I'm thinking of writing another book.
Oh, cool.
Which looks at life and business lessons from stand-up comedy.
That's good.
So in which I actually break down how comedians look at our craft and how you can extrapolate the lessons from that and apply it to your life or to your business.
Cool.
I run a coaching, one of the training programs that I run is called A Comedian's Guide to Marketing and Content Strategy.
That's awesome.
In which I break down how comics look at it, because we live in a world of limited attention spans, 140 characters. You've got to grab attention immediately, retain it, and convince people to your point of view. That's what comedians do for a living, right? We get a laugh every 15 seconds, we're grabbing that attention. What are the strategies we use, and how can that be applied in business? So that's potentially the next book I would like to write.
Awesome. So now here's the thing. So when you're a stand-up, you're performing for the room per se. It's never, you don't have this in mind कि यार मैं ये perform कर रहा हूँ, ये YouTube में जाने के लिए मैं perform कर रहा हूँ.
I disagree with you completely.
So do they have that in mind?
There are so many comedians doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So don't you lose the connect with the audience there over there?
See, for me, I'm mostly a live guy.
Yeah.
So for me, the people in the room are most important to me. But there are tons of people who do stuff for YouTube. And it's perfectly understandable. तुम्हारे कमरे में 200 लोग हैं, right? But you expect it to be seen by 1 million people. So you will sacrifice those 200 for the million.
Wow. So don't you think that's actually unfair for the people who have actually made the effort of buying the ticket and going there and enjoying a live performance where they expect them to be heckled, them to be entertained.
Who said life was fair? No, but what a comedian will do is they will also give the live audience enough for them to be happy. They'll tell them, listen, I'm recording the show for the internet, right? So there might be some bits here. I want your support, but rest assured I'll give you a good time as well. I mean, that's what I would do. I don't know. I've never been for a live taping, so.
Okay, now one more thing. I found something very interesting. So Bill Maher, I'm sure you know, he's a known comic and he hosts a political show too. So Bill Maher was on Joe Rogan recently. That's the power of Joe Rogan now, that Bill Maher abhi Joe Rogan ke aata hai. That's how big Joe Rogan's podcast is. So it was something, they had a very interesting discussion. So I wanted to know your personal opinion also. So Joe Rogan is from the old school mentality that, you know, as a comic, so he always gives the example of martial arts too. He's like, if you want to be a good boxer or you want to be a good jiu-jitsu practitioner, you have to go and do reps.
Yes.
Aapko, you know, you have to practice your punches, you have to practice your jabs.
Yeah.
Similarly, comedy, you have to go and do gigs.
Yes.
You have to go on doing it. Now, Bill Maher was of the complete opposite. He's like, I can't do show gigs. I just do big audiences, or I do this and that's it. I kind of graduated from that school. So where do you come at it personally from a comics perspective?
I'm very old school. I'm a purist, so I'm definitely in the Joe Rogan side of this argument. So for example, there was an episode called Talking Funny, which was produced by Ricky Gervais, and it had on that chat, it had Ricky Gervais, Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld and Louis C.K. Now if you watch that, I mean, of course it's a little different now, it's quite old. You will see that in that bit, Ricky Gervais doesn't belong. Because a CK, a Chris Rock and a Jerry Seinfeld have worked the clubs for 20 years, right? They have got superb at their craft and then they have become famous. Whereas Ricky Gervais has become famous first, then started doing the stand-up, right? So his proficiency at the craft is not at the same level, at least in that podcast. Now, of course, he's very, very good.
He's amazing.
Right, he's amazing. But you can see the difference. So what happens is somebody like a Bill Maher, now today that's a problem that's happening in India, for example. Today, every new guy starting out stand-up comedy wants to be famous. Right? I'm going to create this 5-minute to 10-minute clip. It's going to get online on YouTube. It'll get 5 million views. I will be famous. Sure, you become famous. Then you can fill up a 600-seater theater. People come in. Then what do you do? A 5-minute clip on the internet does not teach you how to hold an audience
For an
hour.
Yeah.
It's a completely different gig. 5 minutes, 15 minutes and 1 hour are two different crafts completely. So then you're fucked. Right? So you have to learn the craft. Now what happens is that with fame, right, when you're a Bill Maher or when you're somebody who's become really famous, your fame buys you a lot of time.
True.
And sometimes when you're famous, you don't necessarily have to be good. Right? They're just going there, oh my god, I saw him, I heard him talk, dude, he's so cool, fuck, I got a selfie with him. Right? So a lot of times they're just going to hear you say those lines. And it's more to see your face than to necessarily. But I think eventually at some point you need to be good. Otherwise they'll be like, okay dude, we saw him, like it was really cool that I saw him, but he was okay, man.
Yeah, that's true. And that I think is something that I've personally observed with a lot of comics who are immature in their development. I think comedy, like any other art form, I personally think, you know, no matter what you're doing, like, even if you go to a gym, it's like, you know, powerlifting. You don't lift major weights just on the first go. You have to build your strength, and it's like anything in life. You got to work at it and you got to become very good at it. And once you reach that level, then you graduate. Yeah. All right. So now I have to ask you this question that, you know, when I read the book, obviously I was, you do talk about it, but so you talk about many aspects of your life, which I personally was shocked कि तूने ये सब लिखा भी है book में. So my first question to you is कि why? And second is, how did it feel? See, you are used to performing. See, when I saw the stand-up special naked, okay, मैं CJ को देख रहा हूँ perform करते हुए, I still feel there were tears in the audiences. I've seen you in tears while you have, done Naked. But here this time you're writing it. So how was the transition when you're writing it? Because you have time, and after that you can decide whether I put this in or I take it out. So how did you go through at a personal level, and why did you do this? मेरे को वो जानना था.
So for the listeners, I think what Kushal is talking about is the level of vulnerability and the level of just bare naked honesty that is in the book. Am I right?
Yeah. I was shocked.
So at some level, the writing is a little harder than the performing, because as you've said, I have been publicly vulnerable before in the show, but in the show the audience is still in front of me. So there is some tiny element of control I have on how I can make them process what I'm giving them.
True.
With the book, it's just going out there. Now the reason I did it was because, so here's one fight I had with my editor. There's one chapter that she wanted me to remove almost entirely. And I said, why? And she said, well, what's so special about that? Everybody's gone through that. And I told her that's exactly why it needs to be there. Right? Now, I don't want to write an autobiography that is just a CV saying, oh, look at me, I'm amazing, maine ye kiya, maine wo kiya. Nobody wants to read that. For me, it's very important for my audience and my readers to be able to connect with me. So, for example, when I do the stories about college or about growing up, the first 2 chapters, not only is the audience enjoying my story, they're also reflecting and looking back on their own lives.
Yeah.
Saying, yaar, mere saath ye hua tha, mere saath bhi wo hua tha. I'm reliving my own college experiences or growing up experiences. For me, that was very important. And personally, shayad main zyada bol raha hu, I would like faculty members in colleges or in schools to be saying, boss, every kid should be reading this book. Right? Because I want them to. So here's one of the biggest things that influenced my book. Initially, I wrote the first draft in 10 days. 10 din. Yeah. I gave it to my editor and said, ye le teri kitab. Right? Life story, yeah. Ye hua. Then she said, yaar, tumhari kitab mein dard nahi hai. So I said, theek hai. Right? I said, the biggest pain in my life is writing a book. I went away. Then after 6 months, she called. She said, kya ho raha hai? I had done no work. So I said, bas, abhi de raha hu. 10 din mein maine dard dal diya usme. The biggest influence was my closest friend. His name is Chetan. You've read about him in the book. He said, CJ, you might be a comedian, but this book is about your life. And your life is not a joke. He says, I want you to write the kind of book that my daughters would be inspired by. Now that made me look at it slightly differently. So what I wanted for my readers was them to read about the journey and in many ways have them feel that I'm not very different to them. I go through the same insecurities, the same pain, the same heartbreak, the same challenges. I have the same fears. Yet over the course of my journey, I have fallen down, I have failed. But it's okay to fall down and get up. Right? And how you look at your life and how you look at those problems and those fears and insecurities, we all have them. Right? I'm using the vehicle of my life, but I'm talking about the human experience. And the human experience is same for all of us. If I cut you, you bleed, you feel pain. So I want them to be able to relate to that and connect on it. And then say, boss, agar ye kar sakta hai, ye sab, to main kyun nahi kar sakta? So in many ways, I want that connection to be one where I don't want them to look up to me. Right? I'm the guy who's next to them in the trenches, who's gone through similar stuff. I want that relatability to be there. I want that connect to be there. And that can only come if you're honest. That can only come if you're open, if you're vulnerable. And one of the things I was doing with my happiness project, for example, last year, was I said for 1 month, I will give 1 hour of my time every day, whichever city I'm in, just to listen to people. Anybody who feels that they're going through a hard patch or they just need to talk. I mean, I was qualified that, listen, I'm not a qualified medical professional. I can only listen. If you ask for advice, I can offer you some. And you just realize how lonely people are and how difficult they find it to find somebody who they can open up in front of. We're often scared to talk to those closest to us. We don't want them to worry. We live in this world of external validation with social media. Everything has to appear perfect. So this is me just telling them, it's okay to be not okay. That's a part of life, because if you keep bottling it up, at some point you will crack. So this is me just telling them, I'm a bit broken, but that's fine. And it's okay to say that you are. That's not the end of the world, and life goes on. And hopefully, by reading what I've written, some people will find catharsis or comfort in that. And in their lives be able to say, yeah, it's a bit shit right now, but that's fine, it happens. And we'll find a way to move on.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've always kind of admired about you, that even when I observe you do these things in the Happiness Project, where you go to hospitals or different patients. मैं देखा तू घरों में भी गया patients के,
Yeah.
and you just perform for that patient and you
Yeah.
make them laugh, which I think तू बहुत अच्छा काम कर रहा है ये. And if you guys want to know more about the Happiness Project, just go to Papa CJ's website. You can check it out. जितनी तारीफ की जाए उस चीज़ की कम है, कि वैसे मैं इसको पूरा दिन गालियाँ दे सकता हूँ, मगर इस चीज़ में मुझे इसकी तारीफ करनी पड़ेगी कि ये वाकई में अच्छा काम कर रहा हूँ.
वेबसाइट की कोई जरूरत नहीं, वो तो किताब में भी है.
Yeah, it is there in the book, but I think they should also, you guys should actually think of doing something like this. And I was like, जब मैंने तेरे को देखा था ये करते हुए, मतलब यार ये अच्छा काम कर रहा है यार, ये अच्छा आइडिया है कि यार हम लोग किसी के लिए अगर अच्छा कुछ करें लाइफ में, तो at the end of the day not only they feel good, we also feel good in the process, right?
Because I am a strong believer in karma. That if you can genuinely do good for people without expecting anything in return, कहीं ना कहीं से तो वापस आएगा. Even if it's not necessarily from those people. Don't do it with the intention of मैं करूँगा तो ये मेरे को मिलेगा. Just do it. And I genuinely believe it will come around.
Okay, so now before we wrap things up, what is up next? So what is now in the pipeline? What are you working on now?
I've written a new show called Unbroken. I have to tighten it a little bit. I would like to tour that. I would like to write a few more books. I've found this process quite exciting. I still have to sell the international rights for this book and do the audiobook version. I'm hoping somebody might be interested in a screen adaptation, whether it is film or web series. I'm considering trying my hand at acting.
क्या बात कर रहा है?
Yeah, just because, boss, life is about having fun. I want to try a few different things, and acting might be one of those things. So let's see.
चलो बढ़िया है यार. So guys, if you want to buy Papa CJ's book, you can just go to the description of this podcast. I'm going to leave the book link where you can go on Amazon and buy it. And I insist you buy this book, not because of any other reason, because this is probably, when I read this book, I totally agree with CJ. When I was reading this book, when I went through the stories of what they used to do at school or at boarding school or in college later on, these are things that we relate to ourselves. We actually know, अरे यार मेरे साथ भी ये किस्सा हुआ था जब मैं स्कूल में था और टीचर ने मेरे को कान के नीचे बजा के दिया था या मुझे क्लास के बाहर निकाल दिया था. And it's like, while you're going through CJ's journey, you go through your own journey in your own way. And what I like about CJ, and I always liked about him, is that he's an honest man. जो भी है बोल देगा. And obviously in the process there are multiple laughs. So
now you know all the things that I've said about Kushal are true, because he has just validated that I'm an honest person.
and if you want to have more fun, you can follow my Facebook page, where there's only one Kamina who comes and makes my life miserable every single time, and that's Papa CJ. It's like मैं अभी आजकल तो ऐसा हो गया कि जब भी मैं कुछ Facebook पे लिखता हूँ मैं बोलता हूँ ये कमीना आके क्या बोलेगा, मेरे को ये सोचना पड़ेगा उसके ऊपर. So I'll once again, guys, please buy the book. And as you know, I'm on Patreon, so if you like what I'm doing over here, you can go on patreon.com. You can select the Cārvāka podcast. You can support me there. As you know, we're discussing a book right now called Genetics and the Aryan Debate on patreon.com. So, CJ, once again, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast, man. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and please troll me less.
When he says coming on the podcast, means just for attending it. I mean, it wasn't that exciting that.
Oh, yeah. So someday I'll have to share the WhatsApp conversation CJ has with me, and you will understand the trauma I go through on WhatsApp with him. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Until then, take care. Goodbye.
Hello.
Good night.
What about follow Papa CJ on Instagram and Twitter on all
वो सब मैं लिख देता है, वो तेरे description में होता है, तू चिंता मत कर. You follow Papa CJ on Instagram. Everything will be on the description of the podcast. But most importantly, guys, buy the damn book. All right, guys. Take care. See ya.